Tales of Mithrym.
At the Sign of the Running Horse, narrated by Dolynuik, Part 12, Legendary. Elvin and the Warden Captain continued some way further through the forest. All of a sudden, though, Elvin stood still, holding a hand up towards the captain and signaling for her to stop as well. "What is it?" she asked, concerned. "More intuition? Is there another trap ahead?" "No." Elvin stood still, listening hard. "I heard something. It did not sound like a trap. It sounded more like—" His voice faded to silence as he paced along, trying hard not to disturb anything around them. Gradually, the captain heard a sound too. A murmuring, or possibly a groaning. It did not sound evil or malevolent in any way. In fact, it sounded as though— "Someone's hurt," she called out in a whisper. Elvin held the torch out ahead of them, and in its dim light they made out the figure of a man, slumped at the foot of a thick tree. His face was frozen in a mixture of terror and pain. Deep gashes down his arms and legs and across his neck were bright red with fresh blood. From each of his wounds there poured a dark black smoke that seemed to hiss with poison. The captain gasped and cocked her fire wand as she looked around for any sign of a hostile presence. Elvin's face darkened as he came to recognize the man. It was Ducky. So, he had come to help them. The young man had decided to do the right thing after all. Elvin sighed heavily. Just look how he had been paid for his efforts. "There's no one else around us, Captain," he said gravely. "You can relax." She lowered her wand and looked again at Ducky. Placing a hand on Elvin's shoulder, she knelt down beside the two of them. "Wasn't he a sellsword? What was he even doing here? I don't understand." Elvin hung his head. "It's my fault," he said coldly. "I told him to be heroic. He came running to the rescue." Elvin lifted his head again. "He paid the price for my stupidity." Elvin's voice caught in his throat as he looked at Ducky's suffering. The young man was fast unconscious, and what little light remained seemed to be fading from his eyes. The necromancer got him. For a moment they sat there silently. Elvin held the young man's hand and began to pray a soldier's prayer. He turned, though, as he heard the captain gasp beside him. She was reaching into her knapsack. She took out a small vial of dark red liquid. Elvin stared at it for a moment. "Is that—" he began. "Yes," she said, uncorking it and smelling the thick liquid inside. "A legendary one. It cost me 3 months' wages. I always expected I would need it for a particularly dark encounter." Elvin gestured around them. The captain nodded. "Indeed, I'd say this qualifies. If any of us last the night, it will be a miracle." She leant in and poured the liquid onto Ducky's tongue. He swallowed it unconsciously, then let out a long, cold breath. For a moment, everything around seemed to become absolutely silent. Then, in an instant, the dark smoke appeared to evaporate from Ducky's body as his wounds suddenly began to knit themselves back together. His pale face filled with color again, and his eyes lit with life as he began to smile his broad smile. Elvin gazed at the captain gratefully. "You're a good person, Captain, and I tell you, I've met precious few in my life." The captain smiled. "I'm just doing my job. This young man risked his life for someone he didn't know and something he had nothing to do with. It would have been a crime not to honor that. Now, give him a minute or two. He should be up and about in—" Her words trailed off as, all of a sudden, Ducky sat bolt upright. He breathed heavily, fuming like a bull as he cried out. "Oh, by Castilla, necromancers are strong! We're all doomed!" Elvin grabbed Ducky's shoulders. "Calm down, Ducky. You are safe now. You are all right. What happened? Tell me what happened." Ducky looked at Elvin as if he were seeing him for the first time. "Oh, Elvin," he gaped. I went out to look for them. I went to rescue her. I found her in the forest. There were glowing chains binding her. I saw him, too. That dog. I charged at him. He used some sort of whip on me. He called it out of the air. It shone so bright. It burnt. I can't remember what happened next. You were here, and— How did you find him so fast?" This seemed to pull Ducky out of a spiral. He smiled again and tapped at the side of his head. "I'm a tracker. There's no one can outfox me." "It was a brave thing to do," Elvin said with a smile. It was a foolish thing to do, snapped the captain. Why would you go straight for the necromancer? And on your own? We could have used your help, and you wouldn't have nearly gotten yourself killed. Ducky hung his head regretfully. I thought I could take him. An old man like him? What was he going to do? The captain rolled her eyes. Ducky lifted his head again as realization dawned. I was dying? Who saved me? The warden captain saved your life, Ducky, said Elvin, smiling. The young man leaned forward, bowing as best he could to her. I owe you my life. I hope I can repay you for that. If you just show a little more respect for it, that would be a start, she said, a smile beginning to form on her face. She reached a hand down and pulled him up. What do we do now? He asked, stretching. Now, Elvin said with a smile, we end this. Ducky picked up his great sword. The blade glinted in the lantern light. That sounds like my sort of plan. He leapt into the night, and the other two followed him off into the darkness.
Tales of Mithrym are written by Jimmy Clephane. Mithrym is a fantasy world built for the Dungeon Room role-playing game system. To find out more about the world of Mithrym, or to try out the game, go to www.mithrym.com.